Good afternoon. I'm here with County Elections Administrator Isabel Longoria and our County Attorney Christian Menifee. I'll briefly repeat my remarks in Spanish, and then we'll hear from them as well. Last night we learned that the state of Texas will conduct a forensic audit of Harris County's 2020 election results, along with the results in Collin, Tarrant, and Dallas counties. I say the state of Texas is conducting an audit because even though the announcement came through the Secretary of State's office, because the Secretary of State position appointed by the governor currently sits vacant. There's been no explanation regarding what prompted this move to audit an election that happened nearly 11 months ago. All we know is that yesterday President Donald Trump urged Governor Abbott to investigate the Texas election results. And within hours, an investigation was announced. First, I want to say we're incredibly proud of the 2020 election in Harris County. Between expanded hours of operation, 3 times the number of early vote locations, drive-through voting, and more, Harris County ran one of the most accessible and secure elections in modern history. We saw record turnout from both parties, and we were proud of that. I was proud of that. The state's former Secretary of State called the 2020 Texas election, and I quote, smooth and secure. It is clear then that the sensational announcement of an audit by the state is nothing more than a political ploy by a former president and someone who's trying to curry favor. It's clear that this is part of a broader trend where state leaders around the nation are trying to compete on who can best curry favor with former President Trump in order to control the extreme flank of their party. In Arizona, they just completed a supposed audit of Maricopa County's 2.1 million ballots after 5 months of hand recounts. The supposed audit was conducted by a cybersecurity firm called Cyber Ninja, with no experience in election audits. They're going to have to pay $3 million to replace voting machines tainted by the review. The result? No systemic problem was found. In Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, politicians who've lost all decency are pursuing similar audits. Texans are smarter than this. Playing politics with the integrity of elections threatens our democracy. Every time you cry wolf, every time you yell fraud, every time you run a phony audit, you are tearing down our democracy brick by brick, and I'm speaking to every person who is playing a part in this. So all of us know this does not deserve to be treated as a serious matter or a serious audit. It is an irresponsible political trick. It is a sham. It is a cavalier and a dangerous assault on voters and on democracy. I will not be treating this as a serious audit because it's not. I'm working to do everything in my power to stop this, not only because complying with a sham audit will take us away from serious work we have to do, but also, and most importantly, because it will take trust away from our election systems here in Harris County and here in Texas. We're working with our county attorney to look at any legal options. And I call on state legislators to do their responsibility as civic leaders and not be part of this dangerous sham. The Secretary of State's announcement of the audit, the state's announcement, claims that the state will receive legislative funding for this. This is an opportunity for legislators to stand up and refuse to use taxpayer resources to undermine democracy and to perpetuate this dangerous lie. They know it's a lie. We all know they know it's a lie. And they need to do their job and their civic duty in protecting our democracy. 2020 election is over. The votes have been counted, transparently counted. It's time to stop pandering and to stop using taxpayer resources to undermine trust in our democratic system. So to every Harris County voter, Republican or Democrat, Green and Libertarian and everyone in between, thank you for voting. Please keep doing it. Don't let this dissuade you or lose faith in our electoral system. We will continue to do everything we can to protect your vote and your privacy. And we'll keep working to make sure Harris County elections are the most secure and accessible in the nation. Very briefly in Spanish. Estoy aquí con la administradora de elecciones de votantes del condado Harris, Isabel Longoria, y nuestro abogado del condado Harris, Christian Menefee. Ayer fuimos informados que el estado de Texas va a conducir una auditoría forense de las elecciones del 2020 en el condado Harris, al igual que los resultados en los condados Collin, Tarrant y Dallas. Digo que el estado de Texas está llevando a cabo esta auditoría porque aunque el anuncio viene del secretario de Estado de Texas, la posición de secretario de Estado está vacante, es una posición que el gobernador nombra. No ha habido ninguna explicación acerca de qué motivó la decisión de auditar una elección que se llevó a cabo hace casi 11 meses. Lo único que sabemos es que el expresidente Trump exhortó al gobernador Abbott que llevara a cabo una investigación de los resultados de las elecciones y a las pocas horas el gobernador anunció esta auditoría. Primero déjenme decir, sin ninguna duda, estamos muy orgullosos de nuestra elección en el 2020. Entre horas de operación extendidas, el triple de número de sedes de votación, la votación por autoservicio, tantas innovaciones, fuimos un modelo nacional de cómo llevar a cabo elecciones seguras y elecciones asequibles. Hubo participación récord por parte de ambos partidos y eso me enorgullece, nos debe enorgullecer a todos. El gobernador, el exsecretario de Estado, nombrado por el gobernador Abbott, llamó nuestras elecciones y este es directamente lo que ha dicho, sin problemas y seguro. Es claro entonces que el anuncio sensacional de una auditoría por parte del Estado no es más que una táctica política. Están compitiendo a ver entre los gobernadores republicanos, a ver quién puede cuestionar más agresivamente los resultados de la elección del 2020. No porque crean que hubo algo mal, no porque haya alguna evidencia de fraude masivo, no la hay, sino porque saben que esto les ayuda a ganar el favor del expresidente que controla la facción más extrema de ese partido. En Arizona acaban de terminar una auditoría. Tomó 5 meses. La auditoría se llevó a cabo por una firma llamada Cyber Ninja, sin experiencia en auditorías. El condado Maricopa va a tener que pagar $3 millones para cubrir, reemplazar máquinas que fueron dañadas por este análisis político. Pero ya ha terminado la auditoría, no encontraron ningún problema sistemático. En Pensilvania, en Wisconsin, también políticos que han perdido cualquier sentido de decencia están buscando llevar a cabo auditorías similares. Como tejanos somos más inteligentes. Somos más inteligentes que aceptar este tipo de investigaciones. El problema es que jugar a la política con la integridad de las elecciones amenaza nuestro sistema electoral. Cada vez que gritas lobo, cada vez que gritas fraude, cada vez que proclamas una auditoría falsa, estás derribando nuestra democracia, ladrillo por ladrillo. Es un truco político irresponsable, es una farsa, es un asalto arrogante y peligroso contra la democracia y contra los votantes. Todos sabemos que no debemos tomar esta auditoría como algo serio. Y por eso yo no lo trataré como algo serio. Es una cosa absolutamente política y absolutamente peligrosa. Estoy haciendo todo lo posible para detener esta falsa auditoría. No solo porque el trabajar en esto nos va a tomar tiempo que tenemos que invertir en cosas reales, cosas importantes, sino porque va a destruir esta auditoría la credibilidad de nuestro sistema electoral. Por eso le he pedido a nuestro abogado del condado que nos ayude a ver opciones legales y por eso le pido a los legisladores estatales que ayuden a oponerse a esto, que utilicen su responsabilidad como líderes políticos. El anuncio del secretario de Estado o de la Secretaría de Estado dice que están contando con fondos estatales para llevar a cabo esta auditoría. Los legisladores estatales pueden bloquear los fondos y eso es lo que les pido que hagan. Es una oportunidad para que se rehúsen a utilizar los fondos públicos para un proyecto político que tiene tanta posibilidad de derribar la credibilidad de nuestro sistema electoral. Estos legisladores bien saben que las acusaciones de fraude son completamente falsas. Ellos lo saben. Nosotros sabemos que lo saben y ellos saben que todo el mundo sabe que no hubo ningún fraude masivo. Entonces les pido que pongan su responsabilidad cívica en primer plano y que se opongan a financiar esta auditoría falsa. La elección del 2020 ha terminado. Es hora de dejar de utilizar los recursos de los ciudadanos, de los residentes de la comunidad para debilitar la confianza en nuestra democracia. Entonces, a todos los votantes demócratas, republicanos, de cualquier partido, de cualquier preferencia política, gracias por votar. Síganlo haciendo. Sepan que nosotros seguiremos trabajando por proteger sus votos, por proteger la fuerza, la fortaleza de nuestro sistema electoral y por asegurarnos que el condado Harris siga siendo un sitio donde las elecciones son seguras y donde las elecciones son asequibles. Más bien, que siga siendo un modelo nacional. We'll hear now from our county elections administrator, Isabel Longoria.
Isabel Longoria, Harris County Elections Administrator. When y'all found out about this audit is when I found out about it. As of noon today, I still have not received any direction from the Texas Secretary of State on what this audit is, what it encompasses, why it's been called for, what they expect of Harris County. What I do know is when the Harris County November 2020 elections were being conducted under the county clerk's office, right, that there was no question, and there is no question in my mind as to what the results of that election is, as to the conduct of those elections, or anything else regarding anything that might trip an audit. We've moved on to December elections, and we're still talking about last November. We've moved on to May elections, where we've doubled turnout, increased mail ballots, done drive-through voting, done 24-hour voting, and we're still talking about last November. I have an election coming up this November for constitutional amendments in school boards and cities that I'm trying to get folks to register to vote for. Deadline is October 4th. We start early voting on October 18th. And we're still talking about an old election that no one cares about, and I certainly don't care about the petty political fights that have engendered this audit, if you can call it that at all. And quite frankly, I don't even know that the Secretary of State has the authority to do it. It's a question for the county attorney. But frankly, I feel confident the elections, if they want to continue on with this scam, they can do whatever they want. I will be hosting the November 2021 elections on behalf of our Harris County voters and looking towards the future and making sure that our current and future elections are held accessibly, safe, transparently, and equitably.
Thank you. Our state leaders love to talk about election integrity, but here we have they're conducting a so-called audit for the sole purpose of undermining the integrity of our elections and undermining our democracy. Now, what's clear from this is being done in bad faith. We know that because it was announced just hours after former President Donald Trump instructed Governor Abbott to investigate or audit the results of the 2020 election. We know this because, as our elections administrator mentioned, our first time finding out about this at Harris County was via the press release that the Secretary of State's office put out. There's no guidance in that press release. There's no indication of what exactly the Secretary of State's office will be asking for. Frankly, there's no reference to the authority in the election code that allows them to do this. And it's pretty clear to all of us on this side that it's happening in bad faith. So I will continue to advise the elections administrator and the rest of the county, but it's going to be done on a case-by-case basis. When they send over requests, we'll evaluate their requests and determine whether we're required to comply with it. But what we're seeing right now is an act of bad faith, and the goal of this is to intimidate our election workers and the folks who volunteer in elections, to undermine our confidence in democracy, and to pander to a certain set of conspiracy theorists and a gentleman who lost an election 11 months ago. With that, I'll turn it back over to the judge, and we're going to continue to, where appropriate, push back on this bad faith audit.
We'll take any questions.
Has Harris County already conducted an audit of the 2020 elections, and or is there any evidence of election before the fraud?
I'll let Administrator Longoria.
Yeah, so for every single election, regardless of what it is, before the election, we conduct what's called a logic and accuracy test that's laid out in the Texas Election Code. It tests the machines, it tests that they're counting, it tests that they're working properly. After every single election, again, regardless of size, we do something called a partial manual count, where by direction of the Secretary of State, we go through, select a representation of the votes, hand count them, the mail ballots, go back and look at those electronic records for in-person voting, and we countlessly, our staff is continuing to check the paperwork the judges turn in, all sorts of items so that we can, when we close out that election, a couple weeks after for the final canvass, we have complete confidence in the result of those elections and anything that's come up throughout them. So, there's, again, nothing in the code that is a strict audit, in addition to which the state legislature passed something called risk limiting audits. In the last legislature, Harris County has voluntarily joined that pilot program and is voluntarily working with the Texas Secretary of State to create even more audits and even more checks and balances. And what I ask is, we will conduct every check and balance out there, but at some point, people have to trust that the checks and balances are in place, and when the results come out and show that there's nothing to be concerned about, you can either believe the truth or believe the conspiracy theory. But we're doing all our checks and audits.
And if I might add,
Yeah.
I know in 2020, Harris County Commissioners Court approved 2 security audits. They were conducted. They came back clean. Our election systems work. All of us, we vote. We watch news of people voting. We know it is safe and secure. We know all of this is a sham. And I think that's why all of us need to, we can't create a false equivalency here. That this is, on the one hand, state wants to conduct an audit, on the other hand, county leaders oppose it. No, it's been 11 months. It is a sham political idea, and to the extent that any of us lend credence or lend any legitimacy to this audit, we are lending legitimacy to claims that undermine an electoral system that all of us, and lawsuits, and evaluations, and then security checks, and all manner of investigations have already shown are just fine, are secure, and are safe.
Question for Isabel. If what we're talking about here and the highest priority for you guys is preserving the integrity of elections rather than discussing the nuts and bolts of what is not seen as a legitimate audit, would it be better for the county in preserving that integrity to comply with whatever the state ultimately defines as the audit and go through to show anybody who is still curious or in doubt of the sanctity of our election that there was nothing wrong in 2020? Or is the better strategy to just not entertain any possibility that this is a legitimate request that will be coming?
And I'll let Administrator Longoria answer that in one question in a minute, but I do want to make the point that there was a theory out there, right, that if you lend some credence to these conspiracy theory allegations of that fraud exists when we know it doesn't, that somehow that's going to appease people. But we have to remember, these are conspiracy theorists. These are the types of folks that stormed the Capitol. They're not going to be persuaded that their conspiracy theories are false. And not only that, certain politicians have discovered that pandering to those conspiracy theories helps them electorally. And so, we can show, as we have ad nauseum, absolutely no issues with the election, but so long as democracy itself, so long as voting itself is fair game for these politically motivated attacks, this issue is not going to go away. Every time we engage in a conversation about these false allegations, we're lending credence to the lie. Things, even though enough credence has been lent, in these different states, through all the court challenges that the former president filed, through the legislation that passed unnecessarily under the guise of supposed fraud this past legislative session, there's always something new because this is entirely politically motivated. So as far as I'm concerned, doing everything to push back, obviously at some point, if courts force us to do something, we have to follow the law. But before we get to that, we need to stand strong. Legislators can stop that. We're trying to see what we can do here. And all of us need to call this out for what it is. Politics is politics, but it needs to stay out of the realm of elections. It can't be that the strategy of one party is to burn it all to the ground when their candidate doesn't win. That's how you tear down a country. That's how you tear down a democracy. We've seen this happen elsewhere. we have to be responsible. Administrator Longoria.
What she said. The Secretary of State last year called our elections right in the state smooth and safe. Anytime the Secretary of State calls, I pick up the phone, I answer their questions, I comply with the LNA, the partial manual accounts, volunteering into the risk limiting audits. I'm in no way saying, right, that we shouldn't do as we're directed by the Secretary of State, but 11 months later, having had no heads up, having been given no questions, having heard no concerns from the Secretary of State, I am now being blindsided about an audit that we have no information on and no direction on. And so my job is to protect the voters of Harris County, to protect the sanctity of their vote, right? And the sanctity of the election process, not just open up the books to whoever has the new conspiracy theory of the day and say, let's let you just run rampant with election records, right? Confidential election records, Harris County confidential election records of our voters, because you didn't like the answer to the last 7 times we did this. So if people want to hear it again and again and again and again that nothing's wrong, great. But at what point are you going to be willing to hear the truth that nothing was wrong with the November 2020 elections? We've got other elections, we've got new machines, we've got an elections administration office that is making elections even more accessible. So to that question, Zach, I'm here to keep elections safe. I have been keeping elections safe. And as the judge stated, whoever wants to believe that conspiracy theory, it's more on them for believing a conspiracy theory than not believing that we're keeping elections safe.
How unusual is it to not have heard anything from the Secretary of State's office at this point? In typical fashion, do you usually hear from them before? Do you usually find out via press release?
This is the first time that I know of that there's even been a question of an audit. You know, perhaps there has been decades ago, who knows. We are in constant communication with the Secretary of State. Our different departments have to send daily reports. I contact the Secretary of State just for advice on different questions throughout the week. We were just on the phone with them yesterday. Nothing. We're hearing nothing. And so to me, it is, you know, we've developed this relationship with the Secretary of State over, you know, in time, in good faith, in conducting elections. So I think it is surprising to not be given any heads up 10 p.m. on a Thursday night and hear it in a press release for something, again, that I don't know of that has been conducted in Texas before. Perhaps you do historically know. So.
And the only other thing I'll add there, and this kind of ties into Zach's question, is part of it is the fact that we learned about this from a press release, right? But the other part is that all we have really seen is the word audit, right? Which, because of what we know is going on in different counties across the country, can mean a lot of different things. The Secretary of State has not sent an itemized list of requests, right? That there has been no discussion with us about exactly what it is that they'll be requesting. The election code says a lot of things. It doesn't say that you just get to walk in and you can ask for every single thing that you want. So we'll evaluate the requests on a case-by-case basis, but, you know, serious people wouldn't have approached it this way. And again, when you're following an unserious former president, you do unserious things. And right now, we consider this to be in bad faith. When they reach out and they engage us in conversation about what exactly it is, we'll evaluate the request on a case-by-case basis.
All right, thank you all so much.